I'm going to start with a question that gets asked of me all the time, which is, how do you break into the sports business? Right? Everybody's always got a kid or somebody's trying to get into the sports business, but they don't know how, yeah? Because there's no roadmap. Yeah? You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. You want to be a doctor, you go to med school. You want to get in the sports business, how do you do it? Yeah? Or, frankly, get into any business where there's no roadmap. Well, I got a bulletproof plan for you, all right? 3 things. 1, commitment. It ain't going to take 5 minutes. It ain't going to take 5 months, might take 5 years. If you don't want to dedicate that time, if you don't want to anticipate that time, don't start. I was out of work 4 times in the first 5 years I was in this business. And that's because some of the work was seasonal, and it was because I used to get jobs I wasn't qualified for. Because I was a pretty good interview, but I had no experience. So you got to be able to see it through. Commitment. Number 2, you got to start. You got to get going. Stop dreaming and start doing. Well, how do you start, Bill, in the sports business if you don't know how to get a job? Well, how do you start in any industry that you don't know how to get into? You volunteer. That's how you do it. You become an intern. You work for nothing. You subordinate the economics for the short term. And don't start crying about how am I going to support myself. You figure it out. Wait tables, drive a Uber, mooch off your parents, mooch off your wife, like I did. Figure it out. Because you're going to be broke in the short term. Or you ought to assume that that's how you're going to be. And the third thing you have to do, in my view, is you have to learn how to sell. Now, nobody wants to sell. When I interview kids and I ask them, have you sold anything? Do you like to sell? People say, no. Oh, no, I don't like to sell. That's makes me uncomfortable. I'm not that forward. I'm not that good at that. Well, here's the deal, folks. Nobody likes to sell. And nobody wants to sell because it's hard. Go pick up that phone the 10th time after 9 people have hung up on you. That's hard. And nobody wants to do it. So when kids would tell me, I don't want to sell, I want to be in what? Marketing or promotions or whatever vague idea they had about the business, I would say if you don't learn how to sell, you will never develop leverage. You will never become important. People who can generate revenue have power. If you shy away from those areas, you will never have a major position. I say never have. Of course you may have. But if you can deliver revenue, if you can sell, you have leverage. So that's my bulletproof RX. Now for me, I went to law school. I came out here actually to practice law for a short period of time. The sports business was just beginning, and I got hooked. I was a pretty good athlete as a kid. Howard Cosell, for those of you who may remember who he was sort of a negative inspiration for me. He also was a lawyer. And I thought, my goodness, if this guy can become such a colossus, there has to be a job for me here somewhere. And I moved to where I thought there was more density of opportunity, which was Manhattan. Stone cold. I didn't know the town. I grew up in Boston, as you may have discerned by now. But that's where the opportunity was. And after a lot of what I call sort of pluck and luck, I found myself in the office of the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Bowie Kuhn at the time. This was in the mid-'70s. And I had gotten in to see him. His office was as big as his room. And he asked me about my background. I told him I was interested in sports. He said, oh, all right, let's talk baseball. I thought, oh, this is terrific. He says, what do you think of the designated hitter rule? I thought, well, I'm going to be candid, and I'm going to tell him exactly what I think. So I told him I thought it was an abomination and a perversion of the game. This was not a good idea. because Kuhn was the major advocate of the DH rule, which was discernible if I hadn't been such an arrogant little puppy and had done a little research. Now, those days you didn't have your phone and your Google and you could pull it all up in 30 seconds in the waiting room. Well, not so easy then, which is why a lot of us didn't do it. And I walked in there, la-di-da. I figure I'm going to posit candor. I should have posited caution. Bowie Kuhn was a patrician fellow, 6'5", worked for law firms. He didn't care about candor. He measured every word he said. And he certainly didn't like the idea that I had just trashed the DH rule, something that he was trying to get passed. Well, needless to say, I didn't get the job, and the interview concluded pretty quickly. Some years later, I was being interviewed for a job in professional tennis. There was something called World Team Tennis, which some of you may still remember. There's a team actually in San Diego still. At that time, there was a team in New York called the New York Apples, or Sets, but we changed the name to the Apples. I was interviewing for the job of general manager, another job I wasn't qualified for. I was interviewing with Larry King, Billie Jean King's husband at the time. He was the president of the team. And he just wanted to find somebody who was warm, who would help him sell tickets, right? So I qualified, I was warm, and I had a little background in selling tickets. He says, but you got to meet Billie. So come up to the apartment tonight, and you'll meet her. Okay. Dressed up, tie and jacket, go to the apartment, get buzzed up, knock, knock. Billie Jean opens the door. She says to me, where's your stuff? I said, my stuff? What stuff? She says, man, your gear, we're going to have a hit. Your tennis gear. Didn't Larry tell you? She said. I said, not that I remember. She said, that's okay, because nothing bothers Billie. You know what I mean? She adjusts in a minute. She says, you're about Larry's size. She calls to the back of the bed, Larry, fix him up. I'll be down on the court. I'm thinking, there's a tennis court in the building? Do these people really care how I play tennis? They want me to sell tickets. They don't care. I'm trying to suss this all out while Larry is giving me some sneakers that don't fit. I got on black socks. He's giving me a pair of shorts. I take my tie off. He says, you don't need a shirt. Just use your... So I go down to the court, and I'm thinking, you know, and I had prepared. See, I had learned my lesson from Bowie Kuhn. I was over-prepared. But the thing is that preparation doesn't always cut it, right? My preparation went out the window. I had to now rely on what? On my, my authenticity. You know what I mean? In the elevator down, I'm thinking, well, you know what? I'm going to just have a hit. See what happens. I was a lousy tennis player, but Billie knew, and she's on the court. She's got a fistful of balls. As soon as I come out, she starts hitting. And it didn't take her a minute to realize that she had to keep it on my forehand if there was any chance of it getting back over the net, which she did, but she still moved me around the court, up and back, side to side, while she's asking me questions. How old are you? Are you married? How long have you been married? Do you exercise every day? What do you do? Do you stretch before you exercise? How long do you stretch? What have you sold? Do you like to sell? What don't you like about selling? All the while I'm chasing around the court, trying to get a racket on the ball to get it back or look good, trying. She keeps peppering me with these questions. I see you're a lawyer. Why did you give it up? What did you practice? What didn't you like about it? How are you going to handle the athletes when they're not cooperative? Because they're not going to be often. How are you going to handle me when I'm not cooperative? And sometimes I'm not cooperative. All this is going on for about, the fat part of 45 minutes. It's a long time. I'm ripping. Finally, she jumps over the net like she's just won Wimbledon or something. And she says to me, Larry likes you. I like you. You're hired. We're lucky to have you. Imagine that. Billie Jean King telling me that they're lucky to have me. Yeah? I recommend the movie, The Battle of the Sexes. If any of you haven't seen it, that's about the Bobby Riggs match that some of you may remember. At the end of that match, that Billie won, and she agreed to play best of 5 sets in that match. Women didn't play best of 5 sets. She beat him in 3 straight sets. At the end of the match, Riggs jumps over the net and says to her, "I underestimated you." Well, Billie Jean's father would tell her, "Don't underestimate people." And she didn't. She worked like a tiger to prepare for that match. So it's a mistake to underestimate people, as Riggs came to understand. There's a famous story in the music business about the Van Halen rock group. And in all of these rock concert contracts, there are writers that articulate the particulars of the act, what kind of construction for the stage, all the nitty-gritty stuff, and also things like what do they want to be served in the dressing room, right? Well, Van Halen had a writer in there that said they wanted a bowl of M&Ms. A lot of people may know this story because it's a famous story. But no brown M&Ms. And there were penalties on these rider provisions, serious penalties. It cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you didn't adhere to these riders. So I'm backstage because I had a sponsor involved in the event. And the garden guys are fishing out the brown M&Ms. And everybody's mocking Van Halen and David Lee Roth, who was their lead guy, and what a jerk he must be, and, making him, spoiled brat and rock star, and he just gets off on us having to pull out these brown M&Ms and da-da-da-da-da. Well, it turns out that he was very clever. The brown M&Ms were like the canary in the coal mine, right? He wanted to make sure that you read the rider, because the rider contained things about how you set up the stage. He didn't want to get injured. So he saw, if he saw no brown M&Ms when he walked in the dressing room, he knew that you'd read the rider. He could relax a little bit. If there were brown M&Ms in the bowl or the no M&Ms, he was worried about the setup. So if you underestimated him, you made a mistake. The guy was actually genius in that regard. I started a company called Sports Etc. along the way. I had a woman as a partner for 35 years. We shared the same office because we thought it was more efficient. A lot of people talk about partnerships and what's important in a partnership. And what you always hear from a lot of people, often hear, is that partners should complement each other, right? One's good at this, one's a big picture, one's a detail. These are things that get said all the time. And they're probably useful. And we complemented each other because I'm a man, she's a woman. There was certain things that we were advantaged by because of that. But the key element of a successful partnership, in my view, is that the partners must agree. You put them in 2 different rooms, you give them the same fact pattern, the same problem, you ask them how they're going to handle it, what are their next steps. If their answers are different, they're not going to make good partners. Ella and I almost always agreed. So if Barry called me up and I wasn't in the office, Ella would take the call because she had heard half the conversation. She knew Barry. She asked him what he wanted. She'd advance. I'd come home to the office. I wouldn't have to call him back, and in fact, the football would have been advanced up the field. But that only works if you agree with your partner. I come back and I say, what did you do with Barry? You should never have done that. I would have done this, that. Well, okay, you're not going to succeed very long. So for 35 years, we were successful. We did essentially 2 things. We promoted live events. So what's a promoter? People want to know, what makes a promoter? Well, today's promoter is Barry Siegel, right? The moving parts of this event are very similar to the moving parts in an event in Madison Square Garden. You've got to hire the hall, you've got to retain the talent, you've got to control all the moving parts, and you own the bottom line. You own the results, right? That's what a promoter is. And we put on over 1,000 events over a period of 35 years. So promoter is not a dirty word. You're not Don King. See, in the boxing world, Don King had a bad rep, and he deserved it. But promoter is just an entrepreneur who isn't risk adverse and is okay with live events. We also had a corporate practice where we represented corporations and purchased sponsorships for them and other people's events like Barry's and many others. I had a client who wanted, he had a very high-level entertainment event that we used to manage, and we brought in big speakers. And he wanted Bush Sr. to be his speaker. It was the summer, and his son was president. And he wanted to do the event in a fancy place in California. And we actually knew the Bush people because we'd used them before. We called them up. He said, no, I'm in Kennebunkport. The president comes here over the summer. I'm not moving. I go back to the CEO. I say, we can't get Bush. He said, no. You got to figure something out. You always figure something out. You figure something out. We need Bush. I said, well, the only thing we can do is move the event to someplace in Maine. And there was a resort in Ogunquit, Maine. It was a little smaller than the one we had envisioned, a little less sexy, but it was sufficient, more than sufficient. And Bush could take his little cigarette boat from the dock of his home to the dock of the resort, no muss, no fuss, for 75 grand or whatever it was we were paying him at the time. Well, that worked. Well, when you hire ex-presidents, the Secret Service comes calling in advance of the event, do a site visit. So we're doing the site visit, and the head guy of his detail says to me, you know, he's very punctual, so make sure you're early on that dock, because he's likely to be early, and he's going to need a place to freshen up. So, you know, you got to find, I said, well, there's a gorgeous spa here. I'll clear a treatment room, and he'll be able to freshen up. He said, a treatment room? Are you nuts? He says, you got to clear out the whole spa. I said, clear out the whole spa? There's 30 treatment rooms. It's going to cost me $25,000 to clear out this spa. Folds up his papers, starts to get up. There's no negotiating with the Secret Service, right? Okay. So I close the spa. Yeah. The day comes, I'm out on the dock. I'm out there a half hour early. Bush is 15 minutes early. And I had allowed a half an hour for the spa. So now I got 45 minutes. Bush gets off the boat. I introduce myself, and I say, well, you know, let me show you to the spa. Freshen up. He says, what? I said, yeah, your people, you know, said you wanted, yeah, no, let's go. I'm ready to go. I said, Mr. President, we can't go yet. We're 45 minutes. I can't just walk in with you, you know what I mean? He says, all right, well, he says, I guess we're going to get to know one another. He says, tell me a story. So I said, well, actually, I have a good story to tell you. On the day that you and Mrs. Bush had your first son, Effie and Harold Goldstein had their last. He says to me, ponders that for a moment, he says, are you telling me you were born on the same day as the president? I said, that's right. In the same time zone, too. I said, do you happen to know what time he was born? He says, no, but give me your phone, I'll call up Barbara. So I give him my phone, he calls up his wife, and I hear, and he asks her, he says, I'm with a fella here who was born on the same day as Georgie, that's what he calls it to his wife. What time was he delivered? And I can hear her scolding him in the background. He doesn't remember what time. The point there is, again, that some things you can prepare for, some things you can't. And when you can't, you know, you're going to have to think fast, be nimble, and again, be authentic. Authentic. One of the things that we did at Sports Etc. is that because we were putting on live events, because live events are by definition unforgiving, we were killers in our training program. We wanted resilient thinkers. We wanted people who could think on their feet. Well, that and the way that we did it was that if I had a golf event that required 3 people, I would assign a 4th who was the target of training. And that 4th person would be subjected to all kinds of obstacles that we put in their way intentionally. On this particular instance, a golf tournament in Pennsylvania, we had a staff there. I had a target that was in training. He didn't know it. He lived in Manhattan. He needed to get a rental car. When he went to get the rental car, which arrangements the office had made, the arrangements were bungled. There was no car. And we always preached, leave enough time for screw-ups, because there could be. Well, he had left enough time, and he was able to scramble and come up with a rental car. Now he's left with his directions. Now, remember, this is long before GPS and phones. Written directions and maps, old-time maps, yeah? Well, of course, the directions were awful, intentionally, and he got lost. And now he's running a little late, and he didn't know what to do. He pulls into a gas station, thinking he's going to get corrected directions. But he spots a taxi in the gas station. Goes over to the cab driver, and he says, "Do you know where Green Rock Country Club is?" The fellow says, "Yeah, I was just there a couple of days ago. It's about 15 minutes away." He says, "Great. Flip your meter. I'm going to follow you in my car." Now that was brilliant, right? His alternative was to go into the office, hope that he got the attention of somebody quickly, hope that that person knew where the place was, hope that that person could give him good directions that were coherent, that he could follow, and that he could make up time somehow. He avoided all of that by being resilient and by thinking. So we really believed in intense training in that regard because we wanted to develop confidence, right? That's what it's all about, right? And confidence comes from success. It also comes sometimes from failure too, because remember now, there's no effort without error, right? So you can screw up and still learn, yeah? But success, and we wanted our people to succeed, so this kid in the taxi story experienced success. He improvised, he was resilient, he got to the place on time, and now he feels better. So success is the best incubator you can have to develop confidence. Johnny Miller, the great golfer who has become a friend of mine over the years, teaches, I remember we used them for a clinic for children once. Remember now, the quickest path to the heart of your client is through their children, right? You do something for their kids, you got them. So we used to put on clinics and bring in big-time golfers for children, yeah? And I remember Miller, he brought the kids over to a pond, and he let them knock balls into the pond. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I want them to have fun. I want them to enjoy it. I want them to come back. I want to get their attention. And what kid doesn't like to knock a ball into the pond?" Yeah? And then he took them to the green. He didn't take them to the driving range and teach them how to drive. He took them to the green and let them sink a 2-inch putt. Success. Then a 4-inch putt. And an 8-inch putt. On and on until they had experienced success. And that develops confidence, yeah? Now, part of our corporate business required us to come to understand the important difference between substance and politics. Now, I believe that in business and in life, politics always dominates substance. It's too bad, but it does, right? You can be the smartest one in the room, but if you don't understand the politics of a situation, you're unlikely to advance. So I was engaged by the CEO of Cheeseboro Ponds at the time. They had a brand, Brute, and I had a budget for Brute. And the CEO wanted me to spend it in the America's Cup. The event was out here. Well, the brand is Brute, right? It's a brand, it's a masculine brand. There's no way in the world that they belong in a sailing event. And I knew that the brand managers were going to shoot me if I went back and told them we were spending their limited marketing budget on sailing. But the CEO wanted sailing. So now you're into substance and politics. I could have trashed the sailing, but I knew that I wasn't going to change his mind. So I had to go back to the brand people and say, look, we've got to make the best of this. The next one, we'll do something else. We'll do boxing, or we'll do football or baseball. But right now, we got to do sailing. So we came out here, and I'm explaining in advance to the CEO, we got to figure out what kind of hospitality we're going to do. There are viewing boats out on the water. He said, no, I was to the last America's Cup, and I was on one of those viewing boats, and it wasn't close enough. I got to get inside the ropes. We can put our guests on a viewing boat, but I got to get inside the ropes. I said, Patrick, I can't get you inside the ropes. All right? That's where the competition takes place. The big boat, you don't get inside the ropes, impossible. Well, it turns out I knew Gary Jobson, who was the TV commentator, and he had a TV boat, which was inside the ropes. And I got down on my hands and knees. I said, Gary, I need a position on the boat. He says, Bill, you're out of your mind. This racing is 11 miles out of Point Loma, I guess it is where it originates. And we're like this the whole way out. I said, well, he's an experienced. He said, no. He's never done anything like this. There's no way in the world that this guy isn't going to get sick. And if he gets sick on my boat, I'm not going to be happy. And I'm not going to talk to him. I'm not going to have even a bottle of water for him or any food. We're going to be out for 12 hours. If he doesn't like it, he can swim home. It's a terrible idea. Talk him out of it. I go back to the CEO. I start to tell him, He says, no, I knew. See, you pull a rabbit out of a hat. He says, are you kidding me? Tell me where and when. 2 days later, we pick him up. 6 a.m., I drop him at the dock with Jobson. Gary starts to tell him. He says, no, Bill's been over all this with me. He says, I know the rules. He says, I know. You got no time to talk to me. I got my food here. I got my water. He said, just tell me where to sit and forget it. I won't make a sound the whole time. 12 hours later, I'm meeting them at the dock. Gary's got a smile on his face from ear to ear. My guy is green, literally green. He comes off the boat, puts his arm around me. He says, the worst day of my life. So we got to remember politics versus substance, and you might want to be careful about what you wish for. Yeah? And I'll leave you with this one, which is about priorities. So getting priorities straight is really, really critical, right? So I'm in college, and this is before cell phones, of course. It's not quite before phones. But we didn't talk to our parents much in those days. Anyway, I get a call from my father. He tracks me down, and he says to me, I'm having a birthday party for your grandfather. His father, of course, is going to be 90, and he's telling me that he expects me to be there. And I loved my grandfather. But the date was bad. I said, geez, Pa, there's a big fraternity party, and I got a hot date with somebody I've been chasing for months. And I said, I don't think I could come. Big silence. My father was not a demonstrative man, but he was sarcastic from time to time. He says to me finally, he says, tell me, fraternity boy. He says, when your grandfather dies, you going to come to the funeral? So I said, Pa, how could you ask me that? Of course I'm going to come to the funeral. He says, I'll tell you what, skip the funeral. Come to the party. Now, how's that? Huh? So I leave you with that. I practiced law for a couple of years in California, early on. I come back 1,000 times. I can't remember ever having a bad day in California. So you're lucky to live here, and I was lucky to visit, and thank you for indulging me this afternoon.